Hey everyone, so here's a video about whether or not you can actually buy an electric car in 2021. I thought I'd put this video together because there is a range of people in different circumstances who an electric car right now is not going to be for them, and there's just no getting around it. And people probably hate me for putting a video like that out there because there's so much kind of hype around electric vehicles right now. But I think what we've got to say is that for some people they aren't going to be for them, and there's going to be a number of reasons for that. Now, I'll preface this video by saying I am not, I have two electric cars, so and I love them. So I'm not kind of, on one side of the debate or the other. I like petrol and diesel cars. When I owned them, as soon as I got into EVs, I realized that they were the future. No question about it. In fact, at some point in the not too distant future, I will go out and buy a car. It won't be an EV, because all cars will be powered by electricity at that point, and I will just go out and buy a car. But for now, it is still emerging, and they're still emerging. But I wanted to put a video out there which was basically for people who were thinking about getting an electric car. What are the kind of things that they need to consider to see if it's actually going to work for them? Because there's nothing worse than getting into something because you're really excited about it. You think you're going to be doing an amazing thing, and then for something in your personal circumstances to mean that the experience turns sour really quickly, because if you've made the wrong choice on buying a car, then you're going to be staring at it every day, and it's going to kind of get you down. So let's kind of not hype the EV stuff up too much. I've got two, like I say, love them. They work for me beautifully, but for some people out there, they're not going to. So let's get into exactly what we're talking about here. So point one, where do you live? Where you live is going to determine how easy it is going to be for you to adopt an electric vehicle. The reason for that is that EVs are best charged at home, and being able to charge at home or not can have a massive implication to how much you're paying for that electricity. So I have an EV tariff from Octopus Energy called Octopus Go. Now, you can get a referral code below, and we can share £50 if you sign up, which actually makes a real big difference when comparing to other providers. And see if that'll be good for you. If you do get an EV, then having that charger at home on that cheap rate will mean that you could pay as little as 5p per kilowatt hour. Now, in public charging out in the outside world, you might be paying upwards of 50p per kilowatt hour, which is actually really expensive. There's a lot of variation in price out there, but having that electric vehicle charger at home is going to be the way to go for most people. Unfortunately, about a third of people in the UK don't have access to off-street parking, which is going to mean if you're one of those 1/3 of people in the UK who own a car but don't have access to off-street parking, then actually getting an electric vehicle charger to work with that circumstance is going to be really tricky. Now, you're either going to be living in a flat with a car park, or you're going to be living in a terrace house with no driveway, and you might park the car on the road. That's the kind of typical settings that you might find in this country anyway. Now, if you do live in a terrace house, there's nothing actually to stop you from trailing a lead across the pavement into the road and charging your car. However, I wouldn't really recommend it until some solutions come along that actually make that a little bit safer, because you could find yourself liable if someone were to trip over that lead. Although, check the link in the description below for a full download of that, because This Is Money did a really good article on exactly that issue. Also, there are companies like Greenmole, who again are in the description below, who are coming up with innovative solutions to basically cut a section of the pavement out so that you can run your electric cable underneath the pavement, so avoiding that issue of people tripping. Now, that solution isn't actually available in the market right now. They're still garnering interest from prospective customers to see if they want to put that into production. But as you could probably tell, that's going to involve a heck of a lot of expense and talking to your local council in order to get that installed. So until those problems get fully solved and until councils get on board, it's going to be a bit of a difficult experience getting a home charge point set up in certain circumstances in at least this country anyway. If you live in a flat, it could be even more tricky because actually your sort of flat property owner and the owner of the car park, if they're the same company, will probably need to put some of those charge point services in for you, and ultimately they'll want to make a profit off that. And so again, the price of electricity that you end up paying may not be as cheap as some other people who own their homes or have their own home can benefit from. And that kind of stinks a little bit because, you know, it seems to be that the poorest in society end up paying the most for electricity, whether that's because they use pay-as-you-go meters, or, you know, they adopt an EV and then they have to go through this process. So that's kind of probably a subject for its own video. Now, if you do have a home with off-street parking, then you can take advantage of a charge point on the side of your house that can charge your car. But even then, it might not be the easiest experience to get that all wired in. Some people, I think, assume that their home electrics are just going to absorb that capability without too much trouble. And, you know, if you're lucky, that may well be the case. If you've got a spare way on your consumer unit or your fuse board, then it's possible that, you know, just an extra breaker in there and a short wire, if your consumer unit is in your garage, for example, to the charge point, either in the garage or outside the garage, will be all that's required. However, if you live in a home where the consumer unit isn't, you know, nearby to where the charge point needs to be located, that will require running in a fairly decent sized cable to that consumer unit from wherever the charge point is going to be located. You might also need to consult the local network operator and ask them to upgrade the fuse that is the kind of main fuse that the electricity operator owns into your home, in order that you don't sort of over exceed the rating of that fuse. Say if you've got a 60 amp fuse, it's theoretically possible that charging the car and running a few other things in your home will cause that fuse to blow. So they recommend normally a 100 amp fuse is what's required before the charge point provider will actually install the charge point. So alongside those things, of course, is, well, how old are the electrics in your house? How old is the consumer unit in your house? And will the installing electrician actually be confident in the rest of the electrical installation, and want to sort of take responsibility for that installation when they put in the charge point? So there's a number of things, and obviously this is all stuff that you can investigate before you do bite the bullet and buy an EV. But it's worth considering your home. Once you get there, though, and once you have those checks, and if it's all good, then you will have access to the cheapest way, the most convenient way of charging up your EV. And it really is a fantastic way of charging the car. By far the cheapest. You come out to every day a full car. So there we go. So that is point one, your home. Make sure your home is compatible with the sort of EV ownership experience. And if it's not, let me know. Have you tried it? Have you tried to get round it? How have you got round it? Let me know in the comments below. Point 2 is, will you max out the range of your chosen electric vehicle the whole time? And that for me is the range that it can actually do, not the range that it's promised it can do, but the range it can actually do. So if your car does 150 miles, are you going to do 150 miles every day? Because there's a seasonal variation in the range that an electric car has. So if you kind of go to the maximum of that and it's just your commute to work, then actually in the winter you might find you need to charge it at some point along the way, because you will not use as much energy in the summer as you will in the winter. And there's also, you'll have the heater on, for example, but the battery is also less the battery itself might need heating as well, and that will take energy. The performance of the batteries in winter, in colder climates, is also a factor. So if you're using the maximum range of the vehicle, have a think about that, because you might find that maximum range gets shorter in the colder months, and therefore you can't make that journey, and therefore you have to make sure you've got charging points along the road that you take. This is not a problem for me. I do not do in 1 or 2 weeks even enough driving to deplete the battery in my vehicle. I probably top the car up once or twice a week at most. Sometimes I can go 2 weeks without charging the car up. So that's one thing to think about. And also, if you're looking at maximum ranges, then actually take those maximum ranges with a bit of a pinch of salt, because just like with petrol and diesel cars, the manufacturers make all kinds of claims about the range, which isn't necessarily something you're going to be able to replicate in the real world. So just bear that in mind. And the other thing, of course, is that if you are looking for a car with a really, really long range, you will also then have a much more limited choice of car on the market. Third point, and it's kind of related to the other 2 points that we just talked about. Will you use and will you rely on public charging infrastructure? So will you rely on public charging infrastructure because you don't have the charging infrastructure at home, or your journey on a daily basis takes you beyond the range of the vehicle that you have? And for me, this is a bit of a challenge. There's kind of 2 ways you can look at this thing. If you want reliable public charging infrastructure, then you probably want to go down the Tesla road, because they've invested a huge amount in their public charging infrastructure. That said, you still need to check, because it might not be that you've got that much in your local area. So do take that into consideration. If you need to rely on any other kind of public charging infrastructure, so you don't own a Tesla, because if you don't own a Tesla, you can't use the Tesla infrastructure at all, then you are going to be faced with a variety of different charging infrastructure providers, some of which will still need you to have a mobile phone app in order to access it. Although they are getting a little bit better with that. They are now starting to put contactless payment devices in the chargers so that they can charge you up. The other thing then you're going to have to worry about is, well, which kind of charger are you going to get to? Is it going to be an all singing, all dancing 150 kilowatt charger, or is it going to be a very slow 4 kilowatt charger, or 7 kilowatt charger, or 22 kilowatt charger? There's all kinds of different 50 kilowatt charger. There's all different flavors of charger. So you need to know, and that, and then is your car going to be compatible with that charger, because you've got CHAdeMO, CCS, and you've got the AC charging plugs. You've got Type 1 and Type 2 AC. So you've got 4 different types of charging plug out there. Most charging infrastructure providers cater for all of them. However, InstaVolt don't. So InstaVolt only do CHAdeMO and CCS, which are the 2 rapid charging standards. So they don't do the AC charging standard, which is a bit annoying because the thing coming out of the ground into the charger is going to be AC because that's how power is transmitted around the country. So it really shouldn't have been that much of an issue to put a little AC outlet on there, but hey, that's what they did. But it does mean, if you rock up to a charger and then you go, oh, well, it doesn't actually charge my car, that could leave a bit of a sour taste in the mouth of your EV ownership experience. But of course, you'll only make that mistake once, so I'm sure you get used to it. But just think about the kind of infrastructure you've got around you and what your car supports. One of the things that is completely different amongst all of the EVs is actually how fast they will charge. So even if you have CCS rapid charging on your car, it doesn't mean that it will charge at the absolute maximum. That car you have will probably have an upper limit. So for the Renault Zoe that we have, it's about 50 kilowatts. So even if we rock up to a 150 kilowatt CCS rapid charger, we can get no more than 50 kilowatts of speed out of that charger. So your car has to be compatible with the charger, and it also has a charge rate that it can consume electricity into the battery, and so that can really affect your experience. And of course, for people who are going from petrol and diesel cars, where it's essentially just an empty bucket and pour some stuff in, this is kind of can be a lot to sort of get your head around. And hopefully over the next 10 years it'll all kind of harmonize up, and everyone will be able to kind of just rock up and charge, and they won't have to think too much about it. But right now that's certainly not the case. Point 4 is the type of car that you want to own in an EV format actually available. So right now, car manufacturers have got maybe 1 or 2 models of EV available in their entire range of vehicles. So the chances of you actually having the choice of car type and brand are actually quite limited. So we normally buy Volkswagen or Audi cars. That's just kind of what I've grown up with, and that's what I've bought. And so when we chose to get our first EV, the choice from Volkswagen and Audi was zero. There was no electric vehicle at the time. So we looked at Renault and we liked the look of the Zoe, so we bought one of those. And subsequently we've leased a Nissan Leaf as well. Now, this is a real challenge, I think, because first of all, some types of car just don't exist in an EV format. So if you want a pickup truck, if you want a large people carrier, there is the Tesla Model X, but that's £120,000. So I think the second-hand values of them is about £65,000. So it's a very, very expensive people carrier. But like a Ford or a Volkswagen people carrier that people might normally buy for a family, that is not currently available, certainly at the price point anywhere near what you can get from a petrol or diesel version. There's a few super minis, hatchbacks are fairly plentiful. Estate cars though, you have a choice of one estate car. So you really don't have much of a choice. If you want to go out there and buy a Volvo V70 electric, you can't. Not there, doesn't exist. Audi A6, Audi A4. The only electric vehicle Audi do at the moment, at least they're selling at the moment, is the Audi e-tron. There is another one which is just kind of getting the reviews right now. Again, very premium vehicle. So there isn't that great amount of choice out there right now. If you want to own an EV, you've really either got to be prepared to shift your ownership to a different brand, or you've got to be prepared to buy whatever the brand that you like is currently offering. So right now, Ford is offering the Mach-E, and that's it. There is no Fiesta, there is no Focus, there is no S-Max, nothing else, just the Mach-E. So, it's really about consumer choice, I think. Now, of course, that will fill out, but right now in 2021, the choice is still much more limited than it is on the petrol and diesel equivalents. The other thing, of course, is that they tend to be a little bit more expensive, but actually that's not too bad, because when you start to think about all the other things that you're not paying for, servicing, the cost of fuel, if you can charge at home, and for example, the residual values of our Zoe compared to the residual values of any other kind of Renault were unbelievable. We only lost a couple of £1,000 in a couple of years, and normally you'd probably lose that just driving it off the dealership forecourt. So it's they do retain their value. The second-hand market is also difficult because EVs haven't been around for that long. So if I think back to when I purchased the first EV in 2018, if I go back 10 years, there wasn't really that much around. So a 10-year-old EV wouldn't have even existed in comparison. But just going back 2 years, or a year actually, if I'd have bought a year-old Renault Zoe, I would have got half the range because the battery was half the size. So the innovation and the speed of improvements in battery technology is such that buying the new one right now gives you a lot of benefits. However, as the ZE40 and other cars get a little bit older, there is now emerging a second-hand market of vehicles where there is a decent range associated with them. But if you go back 3, 4, 5 years, then the kinds of EVs that are actually out there in the second-hand market really have quite large compromises when compared to a brand new one. And that's why when I bought an EV, I bought a brand new car. And it was the first time ever that I have bought a brand new car. Because for me, the second-hand market for petrol and diesel vehicles was a market where I could get a lot more for my money. I could just get, for £5,000 or £6,000, I could get a fairly new car with, maybe a few miles on the clock, but actually lots and lots of bells and whistles, heated seats and, heated steering wheels and, good entertainment systems, all of that kind of stuff, which if I'd have bought a new car, I would have had to buy the top of the range, really, really expensive car. So I didn't really think there was much sort of value in doing that just to have a car with 0 miles on the clock. But with the EVs, there just wasn't anything that was old and as good, because the rate of change and the pace of change in the EV vehicle market is just incredible right now. It will obviously plateau at some stage, a bit like phones have really. They're all kind of the same now. But, in terms of what you can get from a brand new EV compared to an older EV in terms of range, you're going to get a lot more range off of a newer car than the equivalent older vehicle. So that's it. So that's kind of some pointers for anyone who's looking at maybe thinking about getting into an electric car. There are barriers. There are still barriers, whether that is because of the house you live in, because of the type of car you want, because of the type of distance you drive, or because you want a second-hand one. Then you're going to face those barriers, and I think that's why a lot of people, when they do get into electric cars, like we did, we took the decision. We were a two car household. We took that decision to swap out the second car because we still had that primary petrol diesel car, as a kind of main car. Of course, what we found almost straight away was that we used the electric car way more than we used the petrol and diesel car, and then we ended up getting two. So, that's just kind of how it worked for us. But there's a lot of stuff to unpack there. So just do your research, have a little look, have a think, get some electricians round, have a look at your house. What needs changing there? How can you get that charge point fitted? Is there a type of car that fits your needs out there in the market? When will there be? There's lots more coming. So all of those considerations in. I hope that was useful. Thanks for watching. Give it a thumbs up, and comment below if you've had some of those kinds of experiences. If you found that you tried and you couldn't, or actually, am I kind of like overthinking it? I have a tendency to do that, by the way. But maybe you maybe you've had great success with an EV despite not being in the kind of ideal circumstances. Let me know in the comment. I'm sure you will anyway. It's kind of people do, yeah. Let me know, because I'd be really interested to know. But give us a thumbs up or thumbs down, whatever. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.